quite a few different stories to tell you, and I encourage you to ask me questions afterwards. Part of this gathering is for people to be able to ask questions, to get a clear perspective, to compare truth, so that we may develop a more comprehensive, cohesive, and cooperative reality between us all. To start off with, when I was 6 years old, I was standing in front of a window in my parents' home. Let me back up just a little bit beyond that, too. When I was 6 weeks old, I was adopted. Given a tremendous opportunity by two people that could not have children together, but wanted me bad enough that they went out and sought me. I thank them for that. They gave me a tremendous opportunity in life that I don't know I would have had any other way. But what happened is I was waiting for my father one evening. It was after dark, and we had a little landing that was right next to the front door. It was the landing of the stairway that went up into the second story of the house. As I was standing there looking out through the window, my mother was sitting down at the bottom of the stairs watching television, and I heard this voice, louder than anything I'd ever heard before, practically screaming at me, going, "Hey, you!" Well, as a 6-year-old child, what was I going to do? I turned around and I said, Mom, do you hear that voice?" And she said, No, what voice? I said, "That voice." I said, "Hey, you." She said, "No, I didn't hear any voice. It must have been a peeping Tom." At that point in time, as a 6-year-old child, I just kind of blew it off and didn't really think about it anymore. Well, a couple of years later, I was still experiencing this voice. It had somewhat subdued itself. There was no longer this compelling, powerful voice. But I had become familiar with it enough to where it was almost a friend. I would converse with it. And at the time, it was just a natural thing for me to do. We moved into a new house. My father had a house building drawn up the blueprints himself, and hired a contractor, had it built. And after we moved into the house, probably about August, September time frame, I started having nightly experiences where I would be up in the corner of my bedroom, looking down at myself in bed. And I would watch myself get out of bed, climb out the bedroom window, walk out into the field next to the house, and rise up into an orange cigar-shaped cloud. When this would take place, my observer self, for lack of a better, would be watching my body, and as soon as I would rise up into the cloud, the observer self would become orange, and I would continue on into the cloud, and I wouldn't remember anything else. I'd wake up in bed the next morning, refreshed, wasn't scared, actually got to the point where I was longing for those experiences. And this occurred, my guess is probably once a month over a couple-year period. Being an 8-year-old and without having a detailed log of those events, it's hard to say. But it was enough where it did happen over a several-year period, and it made an impression on me at that point in time. As I went through the development stages, I suppose, of adolescence and puberty, I didn't have too many experiences. When I was in high school, I did notice that I had kind of a proclivity toward really looking into myself and asking a lot of questions within, not necessarily expecting any answers or knowing what those answers were going to be. When I got into college, this was in rural Indiana, where I grew up, I started going to Ball State University, Muncie, Indiana, and I was living in the honors dorm at the time. I had come back home after quarter break, and the girl that I dated through high school, I had broken up with her before I went to school, thinking that, well, we both needed to have our space because we didn't know what was going to take place, and I didn't feel like it was necessary to hold her back. So after going through a quarter of school, I realized, yes, I didn't want to be with her, and I was having a lot of regrets in that decision. So I went back to her parents' house to find out how she was and to try and reestablish things. Found out she was already married, and it just basically tore my heart out. So I went back to school feeling like I had nothing to live for. Got down on my knees and started praying. Basically, I said, Father, show me what's true, and I'm willing to die for it. Now, at this point in time, I think, at 18, 19 years old, a lot of us go through similar types of things where we have realized that, okay, we've got a life ahead of us now. What's our purpose? And I may be lending more numbers to that than is actually real, but I think that some of us really dig deep in that process. About 2 weeks later, I was, at that point in time, already reading a lot of Eastern literature and doing a lot of meditating and experimenting with those types of processes. And what happened was, during one of the meditations, this voice that I'd been familiar with says, Bruce, are you willing to die for what you believe in? And without any hesitation whatsoever, I said yes. Well, instantly, I was taken out of my body. And I had not had this particular sensation as of yet, although I had had various out-of-body experiences. But I turned to look at my body laying across the dorm room bed, saw it laying there, turned back around and was immediately engulfed by white light. I found myself wondering, what the heck is it? It was so much of an experience that there was, as I recall, no thought initially. It was simply feeling. And it felt whole, felt like home, felt warm, felt loving, yet there was no substance. And when I realized there was no substance, I thought, wow, is there more? And immediately I was taken on into a sphere made of pinpoints of light. It had an indigo background. And being in the center of this sphere, I have what I call omnivision. Basically, I can see all the way around me 360 degrees. As I was looking at these pinpoints of light, wondering what they were, I felt intrinsically that I knew what they were. They were the essence of other beings. Whether incarnate or not, I wasn't sure. Well, at that point in time, the voice picks up and says, these are those that you are to work with in order to facilitate the New World Order. Now, it went on to explain that this would happen in my lifetime, and that these would be available, that all the tools would be provided, to have the faith and the courage and the perseverance just to know that it would happen. And at the end of this, I was put back in my body. Well, when I came back into my body, it was so strong that I was because I hadn't been breathing. It felt like my heart had not been beating. I stayed very still for a number of minutes with my eyes closed, just feeling the reintegration process taking place. Now, you can imagine what that kind of an experience did to a young man, basically. I had no frame of reference to deal with it from. I had absolutely no idea of how to take that information, internalize it, be able to do anything with it, yet alone being able to deal with it. Now, I don't know, I'm sure that some of you have had types of experiences like that, to have something like that take place and then turn around and try to explain that to people. It is a real interesting test of your stability, because it does tend to put you outside of the norm.